Revelation did not begin with a palace announcement. It began with a royal jeweler opening a private inventory ledger and pointing to one handwritten alteration that had never been intended for public eyes. Legendary emerald, set once accessible to Queen Camilla, had been quietly removed from her reach, and the order had come from Catherine. What looked like a simple transfer was, in truth, a declaration of power. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The jeweler knew the truth, because he had handled the set himself. In a private recorded interview, he described a necklace, earrings, and bracelet built around deep green emeralds, bordered by old-cut diamonds. Private royal collection, the family-owned store of historic jewels, kept apart from the crown jewels, had preserved the pieces for decades, allowing senior royal women to request them for occasions. His work included cleaning, cataloging, inspecting, and preparing such treasures, which meant he knew every case, code, and signature attached to them. Catherine entered the collection room with resolve. She understood that challenging access could be read as a strike against Camilla, yet she believed leaving the jewels there invited a claim that should never become permanent. The Princess of Wales, a title given to the wife of the heir to the throne, studied the ledger, asked the jeweler to confirm the ownership record, and authorized the necklace, earrings, and bracelet to be moved from the Queen's of Biscayne accessible collection into a restricted vault under her control. Camilla discovered the change when she requested the set for a diplomatic reception. She expected confirmation. Instead, an attendant lowered his eyes and told her the emeralds no longer appeared among the pieces available to the Queen Consort. She asked him to check again. He did. The answer remained the same, and the silence that followed cut deeper than any public insult. The jeweler revealed that this was no temporary precaution. Catherine ordered a velvet-lined case, approved a fresh inventory number, and had Camilla's authorization code removed from the accompanying record. Restricted vault meant access required custodial permission, not merely royal rank. The message was unmistakable. The future queen had drawn a boundary, and Camilla had been placed outside it. But the most disturbing detail was not the transfer itself. Catherine appeared to believe she was correcting a promise the late queen had never formally written down, and Camilla knew exactly which promise she meant. To understand why one set of emeralds could divide two of the most powerful women in the monarchy, the loyalties, wounds, and private expectations surrounding them must first be exposed. For Catherine, the emeralds represented inheritance without ownership, a symbol of duty that had to be protected until the right moment. For Camilla, they represented acceptance, proof that the institution had finally stopped treating her as an outsider. Neither woman saw the stones as decoration. Each saw a verdict, and behind their controlled expressions lay two entirely different versions of what the royal family had promised them. Catherine understood that every historic jewel carried a message far beyond beauty. As Princess of Wales, the title held by the wife of the direct heir, she knew that wearing a necklace could suggest continuity, approval, or even a quiet transfer of influence. She believed the collection should strengthen the monarchy's future, not satisfy personal ambition. That responsibility followed her into every private decision, especially when a piece had been connected to earlier reigns and carried memories the public could instantly recognize. Camilla carried a different burden. Years of hostility had taught her that royal acceptance could disappear as quickly as it quelled. Access to major jewels meant she had survived scandal, endured judgment, and secured a permanent place beside Charles. The king had defended her through public anger, but even his loyalty could not erase the fear of being treated as temporary. To her, the emeralds were not merely historic stones. They were proof that the palace finally considered her part of its lasting story. Catherine felt that tension deepen when she studied an old photograph of the necklace from an earlier reign. At first, she admired the balance of the emeralds and the old-cut diamonds surrounding them. Then she noticed a folded note tucked behind the photograph. Her expression changed. The message was brief, personal, and written in a hand she recognized, though its meaning was not yet clear enough to challenge openly. Camilla, meanwhile, discussed the coming diplomatic reception with her dresser. She touched the empty space at her throat and said the emeralds would finally make the evening feel like hers. The Queen Consort, a title used for the wife of a reigning king, spoke with satisfaction, but beneath it was hunger for certainty. She wanted the room, the guests, and the jewels to confirm that no one could still push her aside. The jeweler later explained in a recorded private interview that Catherine had asked unusually exact questions. She wanted the sets, provenance, the documented history of where an object came from, who had worn it last, whether it belonged to the crown, and whether any private instruction controlled its future. Her questions were not casual. They sounded like preparation. William knew what she was considering. During a late conversation, the prince warned that Camilla would see any transfer not as protection, but as humiliation. Catherine listened, yet she did not withdraw. Her concern had begun much earlier, during one ceremony, when the queen reached for the emeralds, before permission had formally been granted. That ceremony became the point of no return, the moment Catherine stopped viewing the set as merely vulnerable, and began treating it as something that had to be rescued. Months before the jewels disappeared from Camilla's reach, private preparation at Buckingham Palace changed everything. The gowns had been chosen, the guest list approved, and the emeralds brought out beneath bright inspection lamps. Then Camilla stepped forward, lifted the necklace from its silk bed, and made one quiet remark. Catherine heard it from across the room, and from that instant, the set was never safe again. The royal jeweler supervised every movement that evening. Commonwealth reception, a formal gathering honoring nations connected through the association led by the monarch, was approaching, and palace dressers waited for instructions about which historic pieces might accompany the royal gowns. Several necklaces, brooches, and earrings had been brought forward for inspection. Nothing had been assigned. That distinction mattered, because examining a jewel did not grant ownership, and wearing it once could create an expectation that lasted for years. Camilla approached the emeralds with unmistakable confidence. She lifted the necklace, held it against her gown, and studied the effect before turning toward her dresser. "This should remain with the queen now," she said. The words were quiet, but they carried the force of a decision. Queen Consort had not asked whether the set was available. She had spoken as though its future had already been settled. The attendant beside her offered no correction. Catherine heard every word. She became completely still, her hands resting on an old photograph album that contained images of the necklace during an earlier reign. Princess understood that challenging Camilla before the dressers would create immediate humiliation, so she chose silence instead. She closed the album, excused herself, and left the preparation room without touching a single jewel. Yet her calm departure concealed a sharper conclusion. The emeralds were no longer merely being considered, they were being claimed. The jeweler encountered Catherine later that evening, near the collection office. In a documented account prepared after the transfer, he recalled that she asked whether a senior royal could stop a historic set from being reassigned before its provenance was reviewed. Provenance meant the recorded history of the jewels, including their ownership, past wearers, and any instructions attached to them. Her voice remained controlled, but her question revealed that she had already begun searching for a lawful barrier. Catherine then produced the handwritten note she had found behind the old photograph. It stated that the emeralds should be preserved for the next woman who must carry the future. She believed those words referred not to the reigning consort, but to the future queen, who would inherit the burden of the monarchy's next chapter. The following morning, Catherine requested a private inventory review. Camilla did not discover it first. Charles did. When the king learned that she was questioning the emerald's future, he summoned her privately, forcing a conflict that had remained silent to step into the open. The confrontation took place without advisors, dressers, or secretaries to soften the words. Catherine entered believing she would speak only with Charles. Instead, Camilla was already seated beside him, the emerald inventory resting on the table between them. No one raised a voice at first. That made the exchange more dangerous. Every sentence was measured, every silence sharpened, and every glance carried years of unresolved judgment. Charles asked Catherine why she had initiated a formal review without first consulting him. The monarch's household, the staff, and offices responsible for managing the sovereign, official and private affairs, had controlled access to the collection for years, and her intervention had disrupted arrangements followed since his accession. The king did not accuse her of disloyalty, but his tone made the warning clear. She had crossed into territory he considered his own. Catherine refused to retreat. She explained that the emeralds occupied an uncertain category because their ownership, history, and private instructions had never been fully resolved. The princess insisted that the set could not simply be absorbed into one woman's working. Collection the group of jewels regularly available for official appearances until the late Queen's intentions had been examined. Her words remained calm, but the message struck directly at Camilla. Camilla leaned forward. She accused Catherine of treating her like a temporary occupant rather than the queen, someone permitted to sit beside Charles, but never trusted to inherit the full dignity of the role. The queen consort said she had endured years of rejection, only to discover that acceptance could still be withdrawn behind a closed door. Catherine answered that royal titles could grant access, but they could not erase responsibility. Historic objects belong to a longer story than any one person's reign. Charles moved quickly to defend his wife. He argued that Camilla had earned respect through service, and that denying her the emeralds would look like a deliberate humiliation. Catherine listened, then placed the handwritten note on the table. She asked whether protecting the queen's feelings mattered more than protecting his mother's wishes. The king stared at the paper, and the room seemed to contract around the question. Camilla recognized the handwriting immediately. Her face changed before she could hide it. She admitted that she had seen the note years earlier, but believed it carried no binding, because it was neither signed as a formal instruction nor entered into the official inventory. Catherine seized upon that admission. The note had not been forgotten. It had been dismissed. Catherine declared that until the message was authenticated and its meaning resolved, the emerald necklace, earrings, and bracelet would remain beyond every ceremonial request, including Camilla's. Charles did not overrule her. Instead, he turned toward the jeweler and asked who legally controlled the private collection record attached to the set. The answer would determine whether Catherine had overstepped her position or discovered a power Camilla never realized the future queen possessed. Royal power is not always expressed through proclamations. Sometimes it exists in signatures, custodial codes, and the name written beside a vault number. The Emerald Dispute exposed a hidden structure within the collection, one that even senior members of the family had misunderstood. Catherine had not seized the jewels through force. She had used an authority created years earlier, waiting silently inside an overlooked document. The jeweler explained the distinction through a documented account prepared for the palace review. The emeralds belonged to a privately held dynastic collection, a family-controlled group of historic objects passed between generations, rather than the crown jewels, which are ceremonial treasures formally connected to the state. That difference changed everything. Camilla's title did not guarantee access. Permission depended on custodial instructions, recorded names, and the rules attached to each individual piece. The late queen had anticipated such confusion. Years earlier, she created a future stewardship provision, meaning a written arrangement, allowing selected jewels linked to succession to be protected by both the monarch and the direct heir's household. The provision was designed to prevent emotionally important pieces from being absorbed into one reign before their long-term purpose became clear. It had remained unnoticed because no one expected it to be used against the wishes of a reigning king. William read the document alone. He rubbed his forehead as the full consequence settled over him. Supporting Catherine would mean standing against Charles, who wanted to shield Camilla from another humiliation. The prince understood his father's instinct, yet he also knew the document had placed responsibility directly in his hands. Silence would protect peace for one evening. Action could protect the emeralds for another generation. Catherine admitted her fear during a late private conversation. She told William that the transfer might make her appear calculating, as though she had used the late queen's memory to advance her own position. He listened carefully, before reminding her that refusing to act was also a choice. The future king believed the monarch had created the provision because she knew a moment like this might come. The jeweler then confirmed the decisive fact. William had been registered as secondary custodian after the accession, the moment Charles Camperty became king, giving his household the power to request restricted preservation. Catherine's authorization was therefore valid. She had not broken the system. She had activated it. Sealed instruction, attached to the Emerald record, made Camilla's position even weaker. It warned that the set must never become the personal emblem of any consort, whose use might obscure its intended succession. The wording did not name her, but its meaning was impossible to ignore. Charles accepted the legal position without argument. His private response, however, was colder than anyone expected. The vault door may have closed quietly, but its consequences spread through the palace within hours, leaving Camilla to confront a humiliating new reality. Camilla expected a delay. She did not expect erasure. And her dresser returned with the revised jewelry list. The emerald set was not marked unavailable for one evening. It had disappeared from her selection entirely. Queen Consort read the page once, then again, searching for an explanation that was not there. Finally, she removed her glasses, placed them beside the list, and dismissed everyone from the room. The palace moved quickly after the decision. The emeralds vanished from Camilla's ceremonial catalogue, the official list of jewels available for royal engagements, and their digital record was placed behind a restricted access code. Every future request now had to pass through the household of the Prince and Princess of Wales, staff responsible for supporting the direct heir and his wife. That change mattered, because it transformed Catherine's intervention from a private warning into a permanent limit on the Queen's authority. Charles received the legal explanation soon afterward. Advisors told the king that reversing the restriction would require him to reject the stewardship provision openly, challenging the written arrangement created by his mother. Such a move would not only deepen the family conflict, it could force William to defend his custodial role publicly, turning one necklace into a direct struggle between the reigning monarch and the future king. Camilla sat alone after her staff departed. The gown chosen for the diplomatic reception had been designed around the emerald necklace, from its neckline to the final details approved by her dresser. Now the empty space seemed to mock her. She had spent years fighting to be accepted beside Charles, yet one quiet order from Catherine had reminded her that acceptance still came with boundaries she did not control. Charles entered and tried to soften the blow. He told her another necklace could be selected, perhaps one equally historic and even more impressive. Camilla looked at him and said the problem was not the stones. Catherine had defined the limits of her place, and the monarch had allowed those limits to stand. The queen feared the palace would now see her not as secure, but as someone whose access could be reduced whenever the next generation chose. The jeweler deepened that fear in a recorded briefing. He revealed that Catherine had not simply relocated the set. She ordered its clasp restored to an earlier configuration, reversing an alteration requested by Camilla's dresser. The message was unmistakable. Even the physical changes planned for the Queen's use had been erased. Palace staff began treating the decision as a precedent, a previous ruling that could guide future choices. Quiet reviews started on other jewels connected to succession instructions, and Camilla feared the emeralds were only the beginning. Then Catherine sent a private request. She wanted to meet Camilla alone, without Charles, William, or a single aide present. The next conversation would not be about legal access or royal rank. It would force both women to admit what the emeralds had come to represent. Catherine chose a small sitting room rather than a formal palace office. There were no files on the table and no jewel cases waiting between them. Camilla arrived prepared for another argument, but the princess did not begin with rules. She began with a confession. She said the emeralds had frightened her, not because Camilla might wear them, but because their meaning could be lost before Catherine was ready to carry it. Catherine recalled an early private conversation with the late queen. The monarch had shown her the old photograph of the emerald necklace and spoken about patience, duty, and the danger of inheriting symbols before understanding their weight. For Catherine, that memory mattered because royal jewels were never simply ornaments. They could define a reign, revive an old promise, or suggest that history had chosen one woman over another before the family itself was prepared. Camilla listened without interrupting. Then she admitted that the same emeralds carried a different meaning for her. She had spent years being measured against women who came before her, judged beside memories she could never replace, and expectations she could never fully satisfy. Wearing the set at the diplomatic reception would have felt like proof that she had finally stopped living at the edge of acceptance. To the Queen, the necklace represented belonging. Catherine told Camilla that the transfer had never been intended to deny her dignity. She feared that one ceremonial appearance could become a permanent reinterpretation of the praise, late Queen's wishes, especially once official photographs connected the emeralds to a new wearer. The princess wanted to protect the set before temporary access hardened into tradition. She had acted quickly, because hesitation, in royal life, often became silent consent. Camilla felt the wound beneath that explanation. Her voice broke slightly, as she said Catherine could have spoken to her before moving the discoons. Jules, discovering the restriction through a member of staff, had made her feel deliberately diminished, as though the future queen had chosen humiliation over honesty. She could accept disappointment. What she struggled to accept was being excluded from the conversation about her own place. Catherine then revealed the future she had planned. The emeralds would remain unworn until she became queen, then return at an event honoring the late monarch's Commonwealth legacy. The network of nations united through shared history and cooperation. Their first appearance would celebrate duty, not personal victory. Camilla did not demand that the decision be reversed. Instead, she asked for the handwritten note to remain permanently attached to the collection record, so no future wearer could separate the emeralds from their intended meaning. Catherine agreed, and for one private moment, resentment gave way to understanding. Their agreement remained secret. Within days, however, the jeweler's documented account reached the press. What had ended quietly between Catherine and Camilla was about to erupt beyond the palace gates, where one headline transformed stewardship into open royal warfare. By sunrise, the emeralds were no longer hidden in a restricted vault. They were on breakfast television, radio bulletins, and front pages across the country. The private decision was framed as a royal seizure, a calculated rebuke, and the first unmistakable sign that power was shifting toward the next reign. Yet one moment outside Buckingham Palace captured the public mood better than any commentator could. The media divided almost instantly. Some newspapers praised Catherine as a careful guardian of royal history, arguing that she had protected a historic set from being turned into a personal symbol. Others accused her of humiliating Camilla through an unnecessary display of future authority. Custodial review, the formal process used to examine who controls, preserves, and accesses important royal property, was suddenly being discussed as though it were a battle for the throne itself. Palace officials issued a restrained statement before midday. They described the transfer as a routine review of the private collection and insisted that no wider change to royal jewelry access had been announced. The wording only made the story grow. It did not deny Catherine's involvement, explain why Camilla's authorization had been removed, or address the handwritten instruction attached to the emerald record. Every missing answer created another headline. Catherine watched the coverage beside William. She remained composed until one presenter called her cold, calculating, and impatient for greater power. The princess looked toward him and admitted that the accusation hurt because it transformed protection into ambition. William reminded her that defending something valuable rarely looked gentle to the person being denied it. Prince did not claim the decision had been painless. He told her only that pain did not automatically make it wrong. Camilla encountered a crueler judgment in the morning newspaper. Cartoon showed her reaching toward an empty jewel case, while Catherine held the key. Queen folded the page inward before Charles could comment, and refused to discuss it. He continued preparing for her engagement. The king understood that her silence was not calm. It was the last defense of someone unwilling to let public mockery become private collapse. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace made the division impossible to ignore. One woman raised a green scarf and called, "Keep them for the future queen." Another answered, "Camilla is queen now." Their voices collided beneath the balcony, turning emeralds into a public argument over belonging, legitimacy, and succession, the established order determining who inherits the throne. That evening, a major broadcaster placed the necklace between portraits of both women, beneath the headline, "Who owns the royal future?" The palace needed a definitive response. It would not come through another statement, but at the next state reception, where Catherine's choice of jewelry would deliver the final verdict. Before cameras from around the world, she would decide whether to display victory, offer reconciliation, or allow the emerald's silence to speak for everyone. At the state reception, every eye turned toward Catherine's neckline. The emeralds did not appear. She wore a restrained pearl necklace instead, while Camilla entered moments later wearing diamonds chosen from her own established collection. The absence was deliberate. Neither woman would use the jewels to claim victory. By refusing to turn the set into a trophy, they finally revealed what the conflict had truly been about. Catherine had kept the emerald necklace, earrings, and bracelet inside the restricted vault, under the validated stewardship arrangement, a confirmed system giving designated royals responsibility for protecting selected historic pieces. The handwritten instruction remained permanently preserved beside the official inventory record. That decision mattered, because the jewels could no longer be separated from the late queen's intended purpose, or quietly reassigned, according to personal preference. Camilla still held access to many historic necklaces, brooches, and tiaras appropriate to her position. Yet she had accepted that this set belonged to a succession legacy, meaning an inheritance reserved to represent the monarchy's future line, rather than her own chapter as queen consort. The acceptance had not come easily. It had cost her pride, certainty, and the belief that rank alone could unlock every symbol within the royal collection. Catherine met Camilla briefly before they entered the reception. She asked whether the chosen diamond necklace felt right. The queen touched it gently and answered, "It feels like mine." The words carried no bitterness. They ended the personal struggle beneath the institutional dispute, because she no longer needed the emeralds to prove that she belonged, and the future queen no longer needed their removal to demonstrate control. Charles later acknowledged in a private recorded conversation that Catherine's action had wounded Camilla deeply. The king also admitted that she had protected an instruction he had been tempted to overlook for the sake of peace. William understood the cost from another direction. The prince recognized that his wife had crossed a difficult threshold, moving beyond quiet preparation and accepting the lonely responsibilities waiting for a future monarch. The jeweler completed the final ledger entry. The emerald set would remain sealed until Catherine assumed the role intended for her, after which its first appearance would honor continuity rather than rivalry. She added one final request. The record must acknowledge Camilla's decision not to challenge the restriction, preserving her restraint as part of the jewel's history. The conflict ended without a victor standing over someone defeated. Catherine proved she could defend the future at personal cost. Camilla proved she could step back without surrendering her dignity. Royal jewels could not heal insecurity, create belonging, or rewrite succession. It could only reveal character. The emeralds remained untouched behind the vault door. Their silence had delivered the final verdict. One woman was ready to carry the monarchy's weight, while another had found the strength to release what was never truly hers. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.